My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 35 years old, and I discovered what I truly meant to my family from a hospital room. 6 weeks after giving birth to my son, Ethan, my life changed in an instant. I was driving home after a late evening shift when a distracted driver ran a red light and slammed into my car. When I woke up, I was staring at fluorescent hospital lights. My left arm was in a cast, my ribs felt like they had been crushed under concrete, and every breath reminded me I was lucky to be alive. My husband, Mark, was out of state on a business trip and couldn't get home until morning. Someone needed to care for our newborn son. Naturally, Mark called my mother. She lived less than 30 minutes away. Her answer? No. Not because she was sick. Not because she couldn't drive. Not because of an emergency. She was at a resort casino with friends. And according to her, leaving wasn't possible because she had promised to watch my younger sister's dog, while my sister enjoyed a luxury vacation overseas. A dog. My newborn son needed someone that night, and apparently a dog mattered more. Mark tried to argue. My mother responded with a sentence that would replay in my mind for weeks. Your sister never creates these kinds of problems. As if being hit by a car was somehow a personal inconvenience. As if tragedy checked family rankings before choosing its victim. Oddly enough, I didn't cry. The nurse standing beside my bed probably expected tears. Instead, I reached for my phone. I've always been the person who solves problems. While everyone else panics, I make lists. So I handled the real issue first. Within 20 minutes, I arranged for a licensed overnight caregiver we had previously interviewed before Ethan was born. 40 minutes later, she texted me a photo of my son sleeping peacefully in his crib. The moment I saw that picture, I knew he was safe. The crisis was over. The crisis was over. Or at least the obvious one was. Because lying there in that hospital room, another realization began creeping into my mind. For years, I had been carrying responsibilities that weren't mine. For years, I had been fixing problems created by other people. My parents always needed help. My sister always needed support. And somehow, every emergency eventually landed on my shoulders. I told myself it was because I was responsible. I told myself family helps family. But that night, staring at my phone while monitors beeped around me, I started asking a question I had avoided for nearly a decade. What if they didn't need my help? What if they simply expected it? And what if the accident wasn't the worst thing that happened that week? Because while scrolling through my financial accounts later that night, I noticed something buried deep in my transaction history. One transfer. One payment. One detail I had never questioned before. And that single discovery was about to expose a family secret worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. What I found next would change every relationship in my life forever. The morning after my accident, I was moved into a regular hospital room. My husband, Mark, arrived exhausted from an overnight flight. The first thing he did was place Ethan carefully in my arms. For a few minutes, nothing else mattered. Not my broken ribs. Not the pain. Not the family drama. Just the three of us breathing together. But peace didn't last long. While Mark fed Ethan, I opened my banking app. A question had been bothering me since the night before. For years, my parents had struggled financially. At least that's what I'd been told. Whenever there was a crisis, I stepped in. Medical bills, mortgage payments, unexpected expenses. I never kept score because I believed helping family wasn't something you calculated. But now I needed answers. I started reviewing old transfers. 1 month became 6 months. 6 months became 2 years. Then 5. Then all 9 years. The deeper I dug, the stranger things became. The total amount shocked me. Over $500,000. $500,000. Gone. Transferred quietly over nearly a decade. I stared at the screen. I knew I had helped my family. I just hadn't realized how much. For the first time in years, I stopped asking how much they needed. Instead, I asked where it actually went. Using skills from my finance career, I exported transaction records and organized everything into a spreadsheet. Patterns started appearing. And patterns don't lie. One category made sense. My father's legitimate medical expenses. Another covered occasional household repairs. But together, those expenses represented only a fraction of what I'd sent. The remaining money led somewhere else. Dozens of withdrawals. Hundreds, actually. Small amounts taken regularly. Always from the same area. Always near the same entertainment district. I checked the location twice. Then 3 times. A luxury casino complex. My stomach dropped. The same place my mother had been visiting the night she refused to help my son. At first I tried convincing myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe she was meeting friends. Maybe she was attending events. Maybe I was misunderstanding something. Then I found another trail. This one led directly to my sister. Vacation deposits. Credit card payments. Boutique purchases. Luxury hotel bookings. Even influencer marketing expenses. Thousands. Then tens of thousands. Then more. I leaned back against the hospital pillow trying to process what I was seeing. For years I thought I was helping my parents survive. Instead, it looked like I had unknowingly funded my mother's lifestyle and my sister's dream life. Before I could finish reviewing the records, my phone rang. It was my younger sister, Chloe. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't ask about the accident. She didn't ask about Ethan. Her first words were, "Claire, did something happen to the family account?" I blinked. "The what?" "The family account," she said impatiently. "My card got declined this morning." Family account. The phrase hit me like another collision. My sister genuinely believed some magical account existed that paid for everything she wanted. And suddenly I realized something terrifying. She had no idea where the money came from. Someone had spent years making sure she never knew. I ended the call politely. Then I returned to my spreadsheet. Because if the numbers were telling the truth, I wasn't just looking at financial records anymore. I was looking at 9 years of deception. And the deeper I searched, the more obvious it became. Someone in my family had built an entire lie. And they never expected me to check the receipts. That evening, Claire receives a message from a relative she hasn't spoken to in months. A message containing information that will expose a secret her mother has hidden for years. 3 days after my accident, I was finally back home. My ribs still ached every time I moved. My arm was still wrapped in a cast. And sleep came in short, exhausted bursts between Ethan's feedings. But my mind refused to rest. The spreadsheet sat open on my laptop. Every time I looked at it, I found another question. Another inconsistency. Another piece of evidence that suggested my entire understanding of my family had been built on a lie. Then my phone buzzed. The message came from someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly a year. My grandfather. Grandpa Walter. Unlike the rest of the family, he rarely involved himself in drama. He was the kind of man who listened more than he talked. His message contained only 6 words. "I think we need to talk." Something about those words made my stomach tighten. I called him immediately. He answered on the first ring. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he asked quietly, "Did you finally stop sending the money?" I froze. Nobody was supposed to know about those transfers. I had never discussed them with relatives. Not even with most friends. "How do you know about that?" I asked. The silence that followed felt heavy. Finally, he sighed. "Because your grandmother knew." My heart skipped. My grandmother had passed away the previous year. She had always been the only person in the family who made me feel seen. The only one who treated me as more than a solution to everyone else's problems. "What do you mean she knew?" I asked. Grandpa Walter took a slow breath. Before she died, she started asking questions. Questions about expensive purchases. Questions about casino trips. Questions about how your mother seemed to have money whenever she wanted it but never had enough for necessities. I sat down at the kitchen table. Suddenly every nerve in my body felt awake. Grandma knew where the money was coming from? Not at first, he said. But she suspected someone was helping them. Eventually she figured it out. I looked toward Ethan sleeping in his bassinet. My grandmother had known. All this time. And she never told me. As if sensing my thoughts, Grandpa spoke again. She wanted to. That caught my attention. What stopped her? Time. The single word hit harder than I expected. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Grandpa said something that changed everything. "Claire, your grandmother spent the last months of her life putting things in order." "What things?" "That's not a conversation for the phone." His voice had become unusually serious. Then he added, "There are documents." Documents. The word immediately reminded me of the spreadsheet sitting on my laptop. Evidence. Proof. Facts. The very things my family seemed desperate to avoid. What kind of documents? I asked. Again silence. Then, the kind that explain why your mother is going to panic when she realizes you know the truth. A chill ran through me. For the first time since the accident, I felt something stronger than disappointment. I felt anticipation, because suddenly this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about secrets. Long-buried ones. Secrets my grandmother had discovered before she died. Secrets my grandfather had apparently been protecting ever since. Before hanging up, he gave me one final warning. Your mother is going to try to make you look like the villain. I laughed bitterly. She's already started. I know, he said. That's why you need to let the facts speak for themselves. Then he told me something that made my pulse race. A family gathering had been scheduled for Sunday. Most of the relatives would be there. My mother intended to use it to pressure me into restoring the money. But Grandpa Walter had other plans. Because he wasn't coming to that dinner alone. He was bringing a folder. And according to him, everything inside it had the power to change the entire story. Claire walks into the family gathering expecting manipulation. But what happens when her grandfather opens the mysterious folder leaves the entire room speechless. Sunday arrived faster than I expected. By then, the bruises on my face had started fading, but the anger hadn't. Neither had the questions. Mark drove while I sat in the passenger seat holding Ethan's diaper bag on my lap. Inside that bag was a single folded sheet of paper. My spreadsheet. 9 years of financial records reduced to 1 page. 9 years of truth. As we pulled into my parents' driveway, I noticed the familiar collection of cars already parked outside. My mother had invited everyone. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. Not because she wanted peace. Because she wanted an audience. She thought public pressure would force me to apologize, to back down, to restart the money. What she didn't know was that I wasn't arriving alone. A few minutes later, Grandpa Walter's truck rolled into the driveway. He stepped out slowly, carrying a thick brown folder under one arm. The same folder he'd mentioned on the phone. The one he refused to explain. The one that apparently contained answers. When he looked at me, he gave a small nod. Ready? I glanced toward the house. No. He smiled. Good. Honest people are rarely ready for fights they didn't start. Together we walked inside. The conversation stopped immediately. My mother rushed forward wearing her best performance smile. The one she saved for church gatherings and family holidays. There they are, she announced loudly, as if we were honored guests instead of targets. For the next 20 minutes she played the role perfectly. Concerned mother. Heartbroken grandmother. Victim. She told relatives how worried she'd been. How stressed the entire situation had made her. How devastated she felt that I had abandoned the family during difficult times. Every sentence was carefully designed to earn sympathy. Several relatives nodded along. Until she made one mistake. Looking directly at me, she sighed dramatically and said, I still don't understand why you're doing this. Your sister never causes these problems. The room grew quiet. I noticed Chloe glance up from her phone. Even she seemed uncomfortable hearing it. But my mother smiled confidently. She thought she had one. Again. Instead of arguing, I reached into Ethan's diaper bag. Then I placed my spreadsheet on the dining room table. Right in the center. The room instantly became silent. I think everyone deserves to see something, I said calmly. My mother laughed nervously. Claire, now isn't the time for. It is exactly the time. I slid the paper toward the nearest relatives. People began reading. One by one. Expressions changed. Confusion. Shock. Disbelief. The room started filling with uncomfortable silence. My aunt spoke first. $500,000? Someone else leaned closer. These transfers came from Claire? Another relative stared at the casino withdrawal records. My mother's smile disappeared. For the first time all evening she had no script. No prepared speech. No emotional performance. Only numbers. Cold, undeniable numbers. Then Grandpa Walter stood. Without saying a word, he placed the brown folder beside my spreadsheet. Every eye turned toward him. Slowly, he opened it. Inside were legal documents, signed copies, bank records, letters, trust paperwork. My mother's face immediately lost color, because unlike the spreadsheet, she recognized exactly what was inside. Grandpa looked around the room before speaking. His voice wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. "I've stayed quiet for a long time," he said. "But your grandmother didn't leave these papers behind so the truth could stay buried." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then he lifted the first document from the folder. And the moment he read the opening line, my mother's coffee cup slipped from her hand and shattered across the kitchen floor. Because the document revealed something she never expected anyone else to discover. Something my grandmother had secretly arranged before she died. Something that could cost my mother everything she thought she controlled. And suddenly, the family gathering wasn't about money anymore. It was about inheritance. Grandpa reveals the shocking contents of the trust. Claire's mother completely loses control. And a secret kept hidden for years finally explodes in front of the entire family. The sound of shattered ceramic echoed through the dining room. Nobody moved. Nobody even looked at the broken coffee cup on the floor. Every eye was locked on Grandpa Walter. My mother stood frozen beside the table. For the first time in my life, she looked genuinely afraid. Grandpa adjusted his glasses and held up the document. "This," he said calmly, "is the family trust your grandmother and I created 2 years before she passed away." The room remained silent. My mother finally found her voice. "You can't be serious." Grandpa ignored her. He continued reading. The trust included the family property, investment accounts, and several parcels of land that had been in our family for decades. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Primary trustee and beneficiary, Claire Bennett. The room exploded with whispers. My mother's face turned white. "What?" she snapped. Grandpa continued. "A protected education fund has also been established for Ethan and any future children." My mother looked as though the floor had disappeared beneath her. For years she had acted as if everything would eventually belong to her. The house, the land, the savings, the control. But my grandmother had seen the truth long before anyone else. She had watched who carried the family. She had watched who sacrificed. And she had made her decision accordingly. "You manipulated them," my mother shouted at me. The accusation sounded ridiculous even as she said it. I hadn't even known the trust existed. Several relatives exchanged uncomfortable looks. For the first time, they were seeing the situation clearly. Not through stories. Not through guilt. Through facts. Then something unexpected happened. My sister Chloe stood up. Everyone turned toward her. Tears were running down her face. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. Nobody answered. She looked at me. "All those years." Her voice cracked. "The money came from you?" I nodded. The room became painfully quiet. Chloe sat back down as if someone had stolen all the strength from her body. For the first time in her life she understood. The vacations, the shopping, the opportunities, the lifestyle. None of it had come from our parents. It had come from her older sister. The sister she barely noticed carrying the weight. Meanwhile, my mother continued arguing, threatening lawsuits, claiming betrayal, demanding explanations. But nobody was listening anymore. The audience she'd gathered had disappeared. The performance was over. And without an audience, she had nothing left. A few minutes later, relatives began leaving. One by one. Quietly. Awkwardly. Not because they hated her. Because they finally understood. Truth doesn't need volume. It only needs evidence. As the room emptied, I picked up Ethan's car seat. Mark grabbed the diaper bag. Grandpa closed the folder. My mother called after me. "Claire, we're still family." For years, those words would have stopped me. For years, I would have turned around. Explained. Defended myself. Apologized for things that weren't my fault. Not anymore. I looked at her for a moment. Then I said the only thing left to say. Family shows up. Nothing more. Nothing less. Then we walked out the door. Over the next year, life changed in ways I never expected. The trust remained intact. The legal challenges went nowhere. My parents were allowed to remain in their home, but the financial control was gone. The casino trip stopped. The emergency requests stopped. The guilt stopped. Chloe eventually got a full-time job and started building a life with her own income. Months later, she sent me a letter. Not asking for money. Not making excuses. Just apologizing. And that mattered more than she probably realized. As for me, I stopped being everyone's safety net. I stopped financing other people's choices. I stopped confusing sacrifice with love. Instead, I focused on the people who truly needed me. My husband. My son. My own future. Because the greatest lesson I learned wasn't about money. It was this. The people who constantly praise you for being the strong one are often the same people who never plan to carry anything themselves. And sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is put down the weight you've been carrying for everyone else. That day, I didn't lose a family. I found my freedom. If you discovered your family had been secretly using you for years, what would you have done? Comment below. I read every story.